Mr. Keith George. Keith is from the Alabama State Department of Education. He's with our Technology Initiatives Department. And many of you may know him from the ALEX program. How many of you have attended any of those ALEX workshops? Great, great. So you have probably seen Keith roaming around there. I met him several years ago through one of those ALEX workshops, and you are in for a treat. He is a very go-getter, very energetic, very excited about technology and what it's doing for our students and for our teachers. So without any further ado, we're going to have a pause here, and we're going to thank Mr. Highfield for coming, walking in right at that point there. So. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. George.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay, this is going to be a lot better this morning if you guys are very participative, so I hope that you'll help me with that. I do want to take just a moment first to thank you, to thank Ms. Sullivan, Mr. Whitten, the rest of the Madison County staff, and everybody involved with the North Alabama Technology Conference, because this is truly an honor for me. I hope that we can have a conversation. I don't want this to necessarily be a one-way exercise. I hope that when you leave, you will think that it was just a couple of us sitting around the teacher's lounge, changing out ideas. This is what I don't want. How many of you have been to a conference like this? How many of you go back to a conference like that? Wow, no hands. So I do want to talk just a minute about who I am. As Ms. Sullivan mentioned, I am obviously Keith George. I work with the Alabama Learning Exchange, the ALEX program. I was glad to see how many of you had been to an ALEX training. How many of you are familiar with ALEX and use the ALEX resources? Okay, there should be more hands. I also do some work with Apple Learning. That is a technology blog that focuses on apps for devices. I actually do several reviews for them, and they have a little program where I'm called an expert. I don't like that title, but there you go. And I'm also finishing up my last course before becoming a PhD candidate at the University of Alabama in Instructional Leadership. Roll Tide. Roll Tide! So, and I mean, I literally am in my last course. So, that's exciting for me. I actually started with technology in a computer lab like this. Some of you may have seen a computer lab like this. Please don't raise your hand. Some of you may still have a computer lab like this. I hate computer labs like this. Step on the computer labs. Break them apart. Put the computers in the classroom. Stop thinking of computers as being a separate course. Having a distance thing here. Oh, that went too far. But once again, I do want to say how much of an honor it is to be here, and I hope that I can give you something worthwhile today. Now, when Dr. Tommy Weiss, actually, let me pause it for just a second. When Tommy Weiss speaks, he brings an empty chair up on stage with him. Have any of you ever seen him speak when he does that? Do you know why he does that? It's one of those old 1920s school chairs. And he brings it to represent the student, because that's what we're all in it for. If you're in it for a paycheck, please leave, because you should be here for the kids. And so I want to keep that focus, and I don't have a little chair that I carry around with me or anything like that. It kind of would be a bit old school for somebody so involved with technology. So I want to talk to you about a kid. This is a kid that went through a lot of challenging times. He was now you can go. There we go. He was a child of divorced parents. He was raised by a single mom, which made him a latchkey kid. The family experienced layoffs, which caused them to move in with the grandparents. Eventually, there was the death of the father figure, the grandfather in the family. financial troubles led the family to be on food stamps. Eventually, he became one of our statistics. Free lunch. Now, how sad is it that our education system is such that in some ways we want high, free, and reduced lunch numbers? We get more money. Don't we? But this kid also had several other things that were going on. He was a transient student. Because of those financial difficulties, the family moved around a lot. 5 schools from middle school on. How many of you attended more than 5 schools your entire academic career? There's not a single hand up. One. Okay, got one. The new kid, guess what? He got bullied. This next one's going to shock you. More dramatic when it happens than it's supposed to. He became another one of our statistics. He dropped out. Now, our graduation rate in Alabama is going up. Dropout numbers are coming down because of the innovative programs that we have in the state. But this story is not unusual. So when we go through the day today, always keep the kid in mind. This kid did have a teacher there too that made a difference. One of those teachers that paid attention to what interested the kid. Now, I don't know what it was for you, but for me, when I was in junior high and high school, this is what interested me. Okay, a couple of groans. Some of you recognize this. How many of you had one of these? One person? I'm shocked, too. Okay, don't be shy. That's the problem, because this is old school. The Commodore 64. Top of the line. Remember, Bill Gates said we will only need 128K of memory. 128K of memory. And I did a lot of interesting things with this computer. Starting with, that went too fast. How many remember Oregon Trail? And I already gave it away, but how many of you died of dysentery? You're just laughing because it was great. I had some friends that actually tried to die of dysentery. I'm not sure why. But you know what the Oregon Trail was? The Oregon Trail was an incredibly interactive game for its time. By the way, they still make it. How many of you have it in your classroom now? It's still a great game. Okay? They even have an app version of it. But this was great for a variety of reasons because in the social studies classroom, it taught kids, it taught about Western expansion and things like that, but it also helped to demonstrate the hardships that the early settlers went through. And it did it in a way that was engaging for them. Now, look at these graphics. That was top of the line in '83. And we were amazed because the little oxen, his legs would move. Remember that? And this was about how well they moved. Okay. But there were a couple of other things. I would actually get myself in trouble because one of my favorite pastimes growing up, how many of you remember when Sears got computers that could sell them? They were ridiculously overpriced, and it was usually the appliance sales people that were in charge of them. Let's say they were not digital natives. I would go in, and I would just kind of browse around, like I was just looking. And when they turned their heads, I'd quickly escape out to a DOS prompt, load up the basic programming language, write 3 lines of code, and run this script over and over and over. It would just scroll up and down on the screen. And they couldn't shut it off. They didn't know how. So what I would do is I would sneak a couple aisles over, and I'd lean on the wall, and I would time with my Casio calculator wristwatch. I wish I still had that. And I would time how long it took for them to get so frustrated they finally just jerked the plug out of the wall. Because they didn't know that in 2 keystrokes you could stop this. was power to a 13-year-old. Anytime you can get adults frustrated, that's good. Some of the things that we're getting onto our kids now for is because they've learned to frustrate us. We should encourage that. You're only out one step away too far. How many of you ever played Scott Adams games? This is probably a little bit more hardcore. The Scott Adams games were text-based adventures. My favorite was called The Count. It was a text-based adventure. How many of you remember the Choose Your Own Adventure books? Okay, somewhat similar, except again, this is 1983, so adventure games were all text. So on the screen it would pop up. You're looking at a castle. There is a drawbridge in front of you. And you had to type in what you wanted it to do. But it's a computer, so it's very literal. It wanted a verb and a noun. So if you were standing looking at the castle and there was a drawbridge in front of you, and you wanted to go to the castle, you had to type, go castle. And then it would say, you're standing at the door of a castle. Open door. The door is locked. Get key. See how advanced this was? But at the same time, to a 13-year-old sitting in a algebra class where he was supposed to be doing algebra, this was actually very entertaining. Especially when the programmer has a sense of humor, like Scott Adams. I'm in a bathroom, visible items, mirror, toilet. Tell me what to do. I'm 13, what do you think I'm going to do? I don't know how to pee something. Yes, I just said pee in the technology conference. Look, toilet. There's something there. Maybe we should go there. Oh, he's helping me. Go toilet. That feels better. Now come on, to a 13-year-old, that's classic humor right there. Every 13-year-old boy in our class was repeatedly going to the bathroom, virtually. Wasn't quite Second Life, but to us, there were some similarities. So, have I earned my geek cred with a couple of you? Well, I don't see everybody nodding in agreement yet, so let's see if I can catch up. How many of you can quote the line that's coming up? I had to get my Hollywood part in there. And there are 3 important points that I want you to get from that. First off, not all teenage computer geeks that know more than you think they should know are up to evil. Number two, in 1983, there was nobody cuter than Allie Sheen. I don't know what happened to her now, but... And finally, did you catch the line in there in the middle? What's it doing? Or what's it doing in this case? It's learning. How is it learning? It read it over and over, and what was the result of reading it over and over? It was failing. Failure is not an option. Failure is a requirement. We need to let our kids fail in their attempts to do some things so that they keep trying. Now, I'm not talking about graduating high school, and that's certainly something that we have to make sure happens. But what's our new favorite phrase, or at least my new favorite phrase from the CCRS? Productive struggle. Is that when your kid's at home sometimes? When they ask you to help them with something? No, Johnny, I'm going to let you productive struggle for a while. I'm back in 10 minutes. It actually works. Because many times, they will solve the problem on their own. They will figure it out. I guess our projector's a little bit off there, but I want to talk about some changes over the last 10 years in technology. We need to change from technology use to technology integration. 10 years ago, it was important that our kids used computers in the classroom. That was that computer lab I had. We needed to teach them word processing and spreadsheets and database and presentation software. Why? Because they needed to know how to use technology. Guess what? They already know how to use it. How well they use it and what they use it for are now what we need to work with. We need to think of technology integration, not technology use. I've been amazed at the number of, one of the benefits of my job is that we do these little compliance reviews from technology initiatives, and I get to go out to school systems, and I get to look at classrooms. And I'm going to admit, no, not Vicki and Tommy's group, they don't ever put on a dog and pony show for me, but sometimes, when you go into a school and they know the technology initiatives is coming, every teacher is suddenly using technology. And they're using technology because they have their whiteboard up. And it has some notes on it. It's the same notes that they used to have on a legal pad that they would handwrite on the board. And about 6 years ago, probably as punishment work for some kid that was goofing off on the computer, they had them type it into a PowerPoint. It's the same notes. They're doing the same thing. Write down these notes from the board. How many of them still follow the board? That's not integration, that's technology use. We need to get away from that. It is a puzzle. And for technology integration, there's 3 pieces to the puzzle. Now, I am in graduate school. I am hoping to soon have those fancy letters at the end of my name. So I have to do some academic stuff with you. So bear with me just for a couple of minutes while I tell you about a couple of frameworks that I think are very important for us to be using. Let's see if this is going to work. Technology integration is about more than this stuff. I love seeing the list of what makes up the 21st century classroom. It has a projector, it has a computer, it has some devices, it has an Elmo. That's not the 21st century classroom. What's missing? A teacher that knows what to do with it. Okay? So when we think about technology integration, I want you to start thinking about this framework called TPAC. I'm going to give you just a second to take that in. Social studies teacher, I have to have a chart. It's actually a law. Technological, pedagogical content knowledge. This framework was developed by a couple of Michigan State University professors. It was based on an earlier work that just combined pedagogy and content. And I want you to think, these guys are famous now, by the way. They go all around the country presenting, and they've got books and everything like this. And I'm going to summarize everything that's made them famous. Technology doesn't work unless it's taught by somebody that knows how to use it and it relates to the content. How many of us could have said that with about 10 minutes of thought if we had realized it hadn't been said before? And what this is talking about is that sweet spot in the middle, fancy laser pointer, right there. That is the TPAC. That's the center of the TPAC framework. That's the spot where a teacher that knows how to teach effectively has used the right technology for that particular lesson to teach the content. Notice this down here that often gets overlooked, this full big circle. It's all about the context. Some of you in the back, I apologize, you may not be able to see that. The context. Using the right technology to teach that particular concept. Sometimes the right technology is no technology at all. Not at least what we typically think of as technology. So I'm going to refer to this over and over, and I actually have some resources I'm going to give you access to in a little bit, but I'm actually going to play just a short video from the guys that developed this, and I think I have to start this over here. And this was actually from the ISTE conference a couple of years ago when these two folks, when these two professors couldn't be there. And let's see if that does it. So this is them explaining their model and
What is the
playing
thing
back.
called TPAC, and why should we care? In the studio with me are two faculty members from Michigan State University, Punya Mishra and Matt Kaler. Why do we need to integrate technology into our teaching?
Are you kidding me? Do we have a choice? I mean, everything around us has been changed by technology. Maybe the only thing that hasn't is schooling. How terrible is that? Can you think of any discipline, astronomy or political science, art or biology, that has not been changed by technology? So why do we deny this to our students?
And of course, there are the representational opportunities that technologies provide us. Think of simulations in physics and economics, data probes and sensors in biology, digitization and how it has changed photography and music. Also see how these new Web 2.0 technologies that allow users to create, generate, and share ideas and artifacts with each other, that have the potential to allow students, for once, to become part of the conversation in the true sense of the word.
What are the greatest challenges that teachers and schools face?
For the longest time, the biggest challenge teachers and schools faced was that of access to technology. I think that has changed. What hasn't changed, however, is the mindset and how teachers are trained and how professional development is done.
Most technology training is divorced from the context in which it is to be taught, the classroom. It is divorced also from the content to be covered. There is enough research to show that this approach just does not work. This is where TPAC comes in.
TPAC, I keep hearing this phrase, TPAC. What is this thing called TPAC, and why should we care?
The idea of TPAC is quite simple, really. It just means that any use of technology, be it a whiteboard or blackboard.com, a straight edge or a digital computer, needs to fit with the pedagogical style of the teacher and the content that is to be taught. It's a pretty intuitive argument, really. For instance, if you are teaching the names of the 50 states, some kind of a drill and practice software or a game may be appropriate. Of course, that would not be appropriate for a class on literary interpretation or providing students authentic context for writing and feedback. Using a blog or a wiki may be more appropriate.
What do you mean when you say content? What is this C in TPAC?
Typically, when we say content, we mean subject matter, disciplinary knowledge. Physics, art, music, mathematics, you know the usual. So the C in TPAC represents that.
But it is important that we think beyond the traditional disciplinary structures. If you read some of the arguments that have been made for what is important to learn in the 21st century, you will realize that one of the most important skills we need to develop is interdisciplinary skills, creativity, collaboration, and so on.
So what do you suggest?
The important thing, I think, is to remember that technology has played a huge role in this evolution, and it's important that we think of technology as being a possible solution, not in isolation, but in connecting it to deeper ideas of pedagogy and interdisciplinary content. We need to break out of this mold of thinking within disciplinary boxes. The wall between art and engineering exists only in our minds. We need to remember this.
The important thing here is teacher creativity. We must remember that there is no such thing as an educational technology. Teachers need to creatively repurpose existing technologies for pedagogical purposes to teach content.
Okay, so that's a fun-filled little video that has several things to talk about. The first thing to mention is that no technology is an educational technology. Yeah, we do have probably some vendors out here. I don't want to actually see who's out there. But we have some that consider themselves educational technology companies. But for the most part, these technologies are not invented for the classroom. They're invented for engineering, or the business world, and we adapt them. How we adapt them is what makes us educators. That's our skill. That's what makes us valuable. Vicki, didn't one of your schools just get a 3D printer? Something like that? Okay. Y'all familiar with 3D printers? Very cool. Uses a little filament of, actually I don't even know what it is, but of some sort of plastic or something, and it prints three-dimensional objects. It can make these bowls. You really think that was invented for education? Does it have educational value? Yes. Because all of the skills that are necessary to make that system work and to plan out what it's going to build can easily be tied to standards. So it talks about the content being the most important. It talks about teachers being creative. And it talks about the content being divorced from professional development. I love that word, divorced. We have a relationship with professional development. Sometimes it's even very intimate. And sometimes it ends up in divorce. We think about that with professional development, and we sit through professional development sessions and try to teach us how to design databases. There's nothing more exciting than an access, and I mean access to the database program, an access presentation on how to build good tables. Riveting stuff. If you ever find one recorded, keep it on an iPod next to your bed, and the next time you have insomnia, you're good to go. Because sitting in front of a room and telling you how to create an access database doesn't help a kid. What are they going to do with it? Why would they want to build it on their own? Now, if you start challenging them to build a way for a 7th grader to, and I'm going to show my ignorance of the latest trends here, to track their, I don't know what's popular, track their music collection so that they can keep up with it. That's a little bit more engaging for them. We complain about when professional development is divorced from what we're going to do with it, and then we march right back into our classroom and do it to our kids. We have to make sure that things are relevant for these students. So what does this mean for us with TPAC? It means that we have to recognize the relationship between the content, between good teaching and technology. Technology should not be separate. I hate going into schools and them offering to show me the computer lab. I'm sorry, do we have a paper lab? It's just a tool. Why are we separating computers from where the kids are doing their learning? I hate that I can't start these over there. This is a commercial from a leading online university, and then a response from the makers of TPAC.
I stand before you today failed you. I have failed you. I have failed to help you share your talent with the world, and the world needs talent more than ever, yet it's being wasted every day by an educational system steeped in tradition and old ideas. It's time for a new tradition. It's time to realize talent isn't just in schools like this one, it's everywhere. It's time to use technology to rewrite the rules of education. To learn how you learn so we can teach you better. It's time university adapted to you rather than you adapting to it. It's time for a different kind of university. It's your time.
Don't you dare try to start over either.
The system has failed you. A system steeped in tradition and old ideas. It's time to realize. It's your time.
It changes not only what we teach, but how we teach it. It's still a lecture if you happen to be using your interactive whiteboard to show the PowerPoint slides that have the exact same words you would have said. I'm going to issue you a challenge. And I don't pronounce this correctly, I know I don't. And now I'm going to even forget the whole phrase. There is a new model of presentation out there. And somebody, if you know, the Puchik captcha? Is that close to it? Puchik captcha. 20 slides that automatically change after 6 seconds, isn't it? Do that to your class. And still teach them something. If a slide has more than 40 words on it, throw it out. Period. Most slides should have 1 or 2 words, a picture, a graphic, something like that. It's time to rethink what we're doing. And one of the reasons I know we need to rethink it is a couple of creative graduate students got on Twitter and posed a question about why won't you use technology in your classroom? And they tweeted that out. And then they took all of the tweets that they received back, responses from teachers, and they put them into a little movie, but they changed one word. I promise you they did. Let me go back to that. One of the things I'm going to talk to you about is the SAMR model. How many of you are familiar with SAMR? Okay, the SAMR model it's actually kind of old. It was designed by Ruben Puntadura. I learned how to say his name the other day. And it was actually first developed in the 80s in response to technology in the classroom back when we were getting computers. And basically what it talks about is this continuum of technology integration. And it starts with, and I apologize for those of you in the back, this is substitution, where technology just acts as a substitute. The lecture is just a lecture. It doesn't matter if you show it on an iPod, it's still a lecture. Then it goes up to augmentation, where you're actually augmenting the lesson or adding some value to it in some way. So the technology acts as a directorial substitute, but it actually improves it somehow. So for instance, a video that includes closed captioning. This closed captioning is an augmentation of it. It will help some learners. Modification is where now we're talking about significant task redesign. And finally, redefinition is where we're creating new tasks that were previously inconceivable. Now, one of the interesting things about SAMR is it's simple and hard to understand at the same time. So I'm going to admit that I didn't come up with this next little section on my own. I'm going to leave that up there for you if you want to scan that real quick. That's a great classroom visual of the SAMR model. And I should have that big enough for everybody to be able to scan. But the SAMR model is designed as a way for teachers to design their lessons and look at their lessons to make sure that they're not just using technology as a substitution. Where are my administrators? Can I pick on you for just a minute? You've got the skin, right? How many administrators have gone into a classroom and watched a lesson, and then left and recommended the teacher, you need to add some technology to that lesson? Adding technology to a lesson? Technology is not an afterthought. It's not the little nuts that you sprinkle on a Sunday. They would need to redesign their lesson to appropriately incorporate technology. Need that up there just a minute longer? This will be available on the website. What did you do? 3, 2, 1, 1.5? Okay. So I'm going to help you remember SAMR by talking about coffee. I love coffee. I don't think there's anything better than a cup of coffee at 11 p.m. There's a couple of heads nodding. Okay. Well, here's how SAMR is like coffee. Think of the cup of coffee you have at home. And think about running out to Starbucks and getting a cup of coffee. Is the coffee any different? Okay, a couple of heads are nodding. Yes, it tastes better. Okay, but it's still coffee, correct? That's just substitution. It's the same thing. We've just gotten it from a different source. But what about an iced coffee? See a little drool on a couple of it. Okay. Iced coffee is an augmentation. How do we augment it? Rocket science, come on. We added ice. For the most part, and I know some of the places do a little bit different, but for the most part, an iced coffee is literally coffee, maybe a little milk, and add ice. We've augmented it. It's still coffee. We still can pull this off fairly easily. Frappuccino. A little more drool. Hey, look, Pavlov was right. Now this is a little bit more modification, because now we're not just adding something to it. We're not just adding some milk and some flavor and some ice, but now we're blending it all together. And in fact, most of the places use a special machine to do this. Something special has to happen for it. That's modification. Can you make this at home? Yeah, but it's going to be something you set out to do. Caramel macchiato. This is redefinition. Is this coffee? Read carefully. It's espresso. Very closely related to coffee, but now you need an espresso press. You need the flavors, you need a way to steam the milk, and all the toppings. You've completely redesigned this cup of coffee. Substitution, coffee for coffee. Augmentation, we added something to it. Modification, we did something different with it. Redefinition, we completely started over. We completely changed it. Now tell the truth, how many of you want a cup of coffee now? Well, if you reach under your seats, 4 of you have been treated to a Starbucks coffee. And I do want you to see it because I see some empty seats. We did check, there's no gum. Great staff back here. Can we find one? There's one. There's 2. There's still 2 out there. Some of you are getting smart at checking the empty seats nearby. Okay, I've heard that there's one in that area that has not been found. And there's one in the center back here. Okay, if you found one, go ahead and hold it up so we can make sure they've all been located. 1, 2. I don't know who Cameron is, but apparently by Cameron there's one.
Somewhere over there.
There's the 3rd.
And then right over in the middle.
Yeah, I think we found that one. There we go. All right. Hopefully you'll enjoy that cup of coffee. If you don't like it, I do. So that's Sammer, fairly briefly. And the couple of things to remember about this is, and I actually just saw someone at, actually it was in my graduate school class last night, that was at a different conference, the Ribbon Puntadura, try my best to say it correctly, was speaking, and it actually was a kind of an informal thing, and they were actually having one-on-one conversation. And one of the things that he wanted to make sure that everybody remembers is this is a continuum. There are some days that substitution, remember TPAC, there are some days that substitution is the best technology to use. Sometimes. But what we want you to challenge you to do is to teach above the line. On my website, which I'll give you the reference to at the end, I have some references on there that actually align. I think I may have even put that in maybe in my later presentation, that align Bloom's digital taxonomy, the SAMR model, and TPAC. Because guess what? They all fit. Here's the graduate school project I was talking about. They took the tweets, they asked the question, why aren't you using technology? And they changed one word.
And pointy. Pencils are way too dated. I refuse to use pencils in my classroom until manufacturers figure out a way to limit what students can write with them.
I'm sick and tired of policymakers requiring us to use all these pencils without providing professional development. When do I have the time to learn how to use pencils?
I don't trust kids with pencils. They end up doing sketchy things when I'm not looking. You know, kids are always trying to find ways to stay under the radar with these pencils.
If kids can write information down with pencils, soon they won't be able to remember anything in their heads anymore.
I get it. Pencils are toys. But when you ban a learning tool, you reinforce the idea that it's a privilege.
Mark my words. Next thing, they'll have us giving tests where kids fill out bubbles on answer sheets with pencils. What's next?
You know what I hate about pencils. You just can rely on them. They always work. And good luck finding a pencil technician.
My students can use pencils because they could write something mean about another student. In order to protect our children, we must ban pencils.
Pencils are just plain scary and pointy. Pencils are way too dangerous for students to use without supervision. I grew up without all these fancy pencils, and I turned out just fine.
I'd like to use pencils more often, but last time I tried some of my students, drew inappropriate pictures with them. When can I teach students about appropriate pencil use when my curriculum is so full already?
I don't have time to learn about pencils. Besides, students use them at home all the time, so they are probably experts already.
Can you believe I had a kid bring a pencil with the purple dinosaur eraser to school? We need to develop policies to ban this from happening again.
Don't you get it? Use pencils in my classroom. Not all students have access to pencils. How are they supposed to complete their work if they can find a pencil to use?
And what about pressure from pencil companies? They were begging us to give pencils a chance. It can revolutionize my classroom. Well, it sure would be nice for them to cough up some free pencils in, right?
By the way, Extra Normal is the greatest tool ever that went out of business, and it just breaks my heart. How many of you used Extra Normal? It was wonderful.
I refuse to use it.
I refuse to watch that again. No Keith George presentation is complete without a quote by Benjamin Franklin. I'm sorry, that red is a little dark here. He that is good for making excuses is seldom good for anything else. It's time to stop making excuses. If we can be replaced by a computer screen, we should be. If that's your fear, please let me help you back. So I'm going to challenge you to be the change. And I've kind of got the signal that I need to speed up a little bit. So one of the things I want to do, and I'm going to go over this very quickly, is I also want to talk to us about competition in education. Why are we competing in education? Now, I'm not talking about our kids and making them competitive. I'm talking about as teachers. How many of us come up with a great idea and then hide it because we're afraid somebody's going to steal it? Now, you're going to shake your head no a little bit until you start thinking about what if it's an idea for a grant or a robotics competition. Now we're a little stingy, aren't we? We compete against one another, teacher to teacher, school to school, district to district. And we should be cooperating. We are in Alabama, so here's the NASCAR. Put that down a little bit. This is a simulation that a friend of mine uses to teach physics. But I want to talk to you about it with competition. because this is, you can't see the numbers, but that's the number 24 card. But this is, we talk about collaborating being important for kids. So this is about collaboration. Yes, new word, trademark, Keith George, 2014. As long as he's collaborating, he's doing fine. As long as he's working together, he's doing fine. But here in just a minute, he's going to let his competitive nature get a hold of him. And he's going to try to do something on his own. Right there. Watch what happens when you put competition above collaboration. How many of you are a member of a professional learning community? How many of you share ideas with your fellow teachers? Even those ones that minor in you a grant? There are some hands up, and that's great. But we don't always do that. We have a fear in education that somebody else is going to outpace us. We should be doing it together. So how do we do all this? We keep educating ourselves. But I forgot about our friend, didn't you? Well, because of that teacher, it's still about the kids, and because of that teacher, our little friend dropped out of high school, but he got a job. Nothing glamorous, slinging burgers. But he also went and got his GED. Actually went to college. Graduated. And it probably won't surprise you that he actually became a teacher. He got all the little teacher notes. How many of you have those? 6 years out of the classroom, I still have one. Found one from a student the other day, put a picture of it on Facebook, tagged her on it, and made us both cry. Coffee mugs. Especially for you guy teachers, this next one, ties. Those middle school kids just cannot figure out anything to buy a guy teacher except a tie and a coffee mug. So he was respected by his students. He did some PD training for other teachers. He enjoyed that. But the pinnacle came when he got to stand in front of you in Madison County, Alabama on this day. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.